is expected to pave the way for deeper cooperation in various sectors, including defense, technology, and trade. Meanwhile, India is all set to send a team of 5 to 6 negotiators led by Additional Commerce Secretary Rajesh Agarwal to the US on the 23rd of April. Well, at this point in time, first up, joining us on the show is Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary of India. Sir, appreciate you joining us. First up, do you expect a monumental announcement from J.D. Vance Modi meeting?
Monumental is a very, very big word. You know, it began as a private visit and it has been now converted into an official one, and rightly so, because if you convert it to an official one, then the protocol changes and you can therefore receive him more ceremonially and also arrange calls on him by the foreign minister, the national security advisor, etc., etc. So it's a good thing this has been done. Because J.D. Vance is a very powerful figure in the new administration, as we know, and he's taking a lot of interest in foreign policy, which means, therefore, that with regard to India-U.S. relationship, he will be playing a role in addition to that of the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. Our relationship with the United States is now the most important relationship we have across the board. There are difficulties, undoubtedly. President Trump is very mercurial, unpredictable, and he has now put the cat amongst the global pigeons with his tariff policies, and India has also been targeted. And we have to handle this as carefully as we can. We've already talking to the United States about this. We had anticipated that these problems would arise. And therefore, the visit of Vice President Vance is timely. This will be in addition to all the other conversations we've had at the level of the Commerce Minister, even the Commerce Secretary, Additional Commerce, the new Commerce Secretary designated is also going to Washington. And during Vance's visit, there'll be an opportunity to discuss this and try and steer the entire process in a way that we can, as far as possible, protect ourselves against the kind of concerns that we have with regard to the consequences of this tariff on our exports to the United States, not forgetting that the biggest economic partner we have today is the United States, if we combine goods and services exports to the U.S. And therefore, this will be an opportunity to express our concerns and try and build a scenario in which, while we open up our market to more American goods, in return we get something from the Americans, so that it's a win-win situation.
So India has said that no trade negotiations will happen at gunpoint. How do you see India's approach to this kind of a deal?
Well, you know, this business about no negotiations at gunpoint, this is not the, I mean, this can be said, this needs to be said, because we have to also assure our public opinion that we are not going to do exactly what the Americans may want us to do, because they will ask the maximum from us. And there are areas in which we cannot really open up our market to the Americans in the way they may desire, especially the agricultural market. And this is an extremely sensitive issue in India. The Americans have made it clear that they want us to open this market. To some extent, we may open this up. There are areas in which we can do that. With regard to, bourbon whiskey or high-end motorcycles and this and that, one doesn't see much of a problem. Even with regard to dry fruit and whatever, I suppose we can make some concession. But when it comes to dairy products, there are issues. When it comes to genetically modified products, there are issues, and we can't really right on the dotted line. It'll be a process of negotiations. The Americans will try to maximize their demands, and we will have to then stand firm on some things and also satisfy them on some others, so that on the whole, it is a positive outcome, which satisfies the Americans and also satisfies us. So I won't take this business about not negotiating at gunpoint too seriously. We're not looking for a confrontation, and the Americans would be foolish to put our back against the wall to the extent on some issues we will have to say no. Uh, so it's a process of negotiation. Let's not get too worried.
And so, what, according to you, are the challenges in executing this India-U.S. trade deal?
Well, the challenges are that uh, American demands have been made clear. The USTR, in its report, has raised a lot of issues with regard to the Indian market. President Trump has got this thing in his head that India is the tariff king, whereas in fact our trade deficit with the United States is much less, much less than that it has with its other partners, whether it is China or the EU or Vietnam or Canada or Mexico. We are number 10, only $46 billion. And also, if you look at the weighted tariffs that India has against the United States, they are high, yes, but they're not that high either. And if you go product by product, there are products on which the tariffs are also pretty low. But the USTR and the American side wants to raise a much larger canvas of issues, not limited only to tariffs, but also the regulatory process, also the genetically modified organisms, also animal feed, which goes into dairy products. They want us to open up that. Then the whole data localization business. This they also want to raise, and the non-tariff barriers in general. So it's a complicated discussion. It's not an easy discussion. And therefore, to think that we are going to have a multi-sector trade agreement in 90 days, to my mind, is not realistic. What can happen is that in these 90 days, we can create the basis, a realistic basis, a mutually acceptable basis for more intensive follow-up discussions, so that by the time President Trump comes for the Quad Summit, hopefully in September, October, or whenever, we'll be able to sign the first tranche of a multi-sector trade agreement.
And so, with Havur Rana being handed over, where do you see India-U.S. counter-terrorism collaboration heading next?
Well, you know, the fact that Rana has got extradited is a positive thing, and we'll be able now, after interrogating him, actually probe the depth of the conspiracy on the Pakistan side and the people involved. So that's a good thing. And this counterterrorism cooperation has been going on for some time. Whether this has been good enough, deep enough, broad enough, I'm not too sure. Because when it came to Stephen Hadley, or Hadley rather, whatever his name is, not Stephen, Hadley, we didn't get access. We didn't get to extradite him either. And then when it comes to all these Khalistani goons who are running around in the United States, Panoon and others, we have yet to see what the American side does with regard to curbing these people who threaten India's sovereignty and territorial integrity and promote terrorism in Punjab. We have also seen how tough the administration is with Pakistan, because the source of terrorism against India is Pakistan. And in the past, the United States, while they have cooperated with us to some extent, have not put the kind of pressure that they needed to put on Pakistan. Then when it comes to Bangladesh, there are issues that are arising, and Bangladesh in the past has been the staging point of insurgency against India. Islamist insurgency also, Islamic elements also are active in Bangladesh. We'll have to see how much cooperation we get from the United States. So I would say that definitely we'll get more cooperation from the Trump administration because Trump himself has been very vocal about Islamic terrorism. But whether we get full satisfaction, we'll see.
Well, so terrorist gangster Happy Pasya has been arrested in the United States as well. Do you see that change when it comes to U.S. dealing with Khalistanis under Trump than Joe Biden?
I think so. I think under Biden, these elements were given a bigger room, to conduct their very objectionable activities. And there was a belief that, rightly or wrongly, that Panoon was being protected by the CIA and by the FBI because he was saying all kinds of totally atrocious things and threatening Indian Parliament, the Indian airline, our New Delhi International Airport, threatening to blow up our airlines during a particular period and advising people not to travel, etc., and nothing was being done. Now with Tulsi Gabbard there, the Director of National Intelligence, and we know her thinking and views on such elements, I think we'll get better cooperation from the United States with regard to the activities of these Khalistani elements.
So appreciate you taking out the time and speaking with us. Real valuable inputs here. All right, we're going to talk about this with our guests as well. Joining us on the program at this point in time is Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goel, former diplomat. Quinton A. Hitchcock, American political consultant, also with us on the broadcast. Ninad Seth, foreign affairs expert, joins us on the show as well. Elizabeth Laris, Professor Emerita of Political Science, University of Mary Washington. Pathikrit Pine, geopolitical expert, is also joining us momentarily on the broadcast. Ambassador Goel, I'll begin with you, sir. Thank you so much for being here. Sir, it is obviously very important to note here that this is a visit by the Vice President, the first visit after becoming the Vice President of the United States, but it comes after a number of tumultuous episodes of trade like hostile environments which has existed between the United States and a number of countries around the world. Do you think when it comes to these hostilities and these biases and these frictions, India has any kind of an edge in whichever way whatsoever?
Thank you very much, Vineet. Good evening, and good evening to all the viewers here. Two things I would say here. First of all, I think we must understand fully well first that it began as a personal visit. It is a private visit on which we have put in a ceremonial touch, a protocol touch, and we declared it as an official visit. The very program, if you look at it, visiting Akshardham temple, going to Janpat Emporium, etc., it is primarily a private visit, and therefore we should respect the fact that for both Vice President Vance, his wife and family, their focus is somewhere else. There will be visits in the meantime, there will be meetings in the meantime, but those meetings will have a limited kind of a role in the whole case, number one. Having said that, we come to the actual contents of the visit. The real meeting, the real meeting will be between today in the evening between Vice President Vance and Prime Minister Modi. There are issues where there are differences between the two, as it is bound to happen between any two countries, particularly two countries like the USA and India, where we both have our own ideas of priorities for us, and those priorities differ in many cases, and therefore the negotiations are going to be very hard on those priorities and those areas before we come to a kind of an understanding or a joint outcome. Therefore, I would feel that while there are differences and it will take a lot of negotiations, conversations to overcome for these their differences. This visit will certainly give an indication to our side about what to expect in the future. If not concrete discussion, there will be ideas floating around. There will be feelings. There will be feelers to see what India wants and what USA can do. I'm quite certain that JD Vance will be able to reflect the mind of President Trump as it is at the moment. But I don't think that even President Trump will know tomorrow what he's thinking. He changes his mind so often. But within those constraints, I think Vance's visit is important in giving us an indication of what to expect from President Trump in future. Rest will depend upon actual negotiations between the teams. Our team is going to the USA to talk about the bilateral trade agreement, which is a very important one. And let us see what happens there. It's not going to be an easy process. And I completely agree with Ambassador Sibbal that to expect that we will have some kind of a deal in 90 days, impossible to my mind. These are very complex issues and they are not limited to just tariff. There are so many other ideas there. So there are barriers of all kinds. So we should just leave it there and let us see what happens. But the good thing is that both India and the USA,
Okay.
they have a conversation going on in a good atmosphere.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Let me also rope in Quinton into this conversation. Quinton, the Americans are being accused of being a little too overprotective of their economy right now. This is a charge that has been levied on India also a number of times over the last few decades. Do you think that perhaps that is an automatic platform for both these countries to understand where each is coming from, and hence the probability of working out something tangible that works in our favor for both the countries is quite a possibility with JD Vance here?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. I think we should also remember that this visit is coming at a very interesting time. I think it accomplishes many things, but perhaps the most important thing that it accomplishes is this sends a message to China that the world's largest two democracies can start working together and increasing their bilateral trade value. So I think my anticipation is that trade, tariffs, the economy is going to probably drive these meetings. I also want to point out, while this may be a personal visit, I don't want to call it a vacation for the vice president. I think there's a lot at stake for the U.S. I think there's a lot at stake for India during these meetings. So I think a lot can get accomplished. We look at some of the economic measures that the United States has been initiating with India over the past few months and over the past few years. For example, in February, discussions began that are going to start increasing bilateral trade value between the two countries to about $500 billion US in just the next 5 years. That puts trade value with the US up into the same category as China and Mexico. So that's a very significant measure, especially given the turmoil that the United States and China are having, not just economically, but also militarily regarding Taiwan and some of the issues in the Indo-Pacific. So point in all is that India has a tremendous opportunity with the United States, especially now. The United States understands that. The vice president and the Trump White House in whole understands that. So it should be very interesting to see how this plays out. But I am very optimistic that the two countries are going to just further their relationship and work very collaboratively together, not just in this administration, but moving forward beyond that.
Fair enough. Great points. Elizabeth, the importance of realizing that India is not a fair weather friend now. India is a partner to American interests, not only when it comes to offsetting and upsetting the advances which China is making, which is of course something that is perceived as a threat by the Americans, but also understanding that India is a juggernaut in itself, and nothing could pay a bigger testimony to the fact that JD Vance decided to turn this personal trip into a professional one and understand that dealing with India is priority, especially when it comes to these tariff wars?
Yeah, the timing, of course, is very, very interesting. President Trump had slapped on India 26% tariff increases, which is huge. And so now that's been paused for 90 days. It gives the two countries breathing room to discuss where to go forward. The problem, of course, in India is there are domestic considerations. That is, India protects its agriculture to a certain extent. And so for the United States to put pressure on the Modi government to accept more U.S. agricultural exports is going to be very difficult, for farmers in India. Matter of fact, they were planning to greet Vice President Vance with a protest. But also at the same time, there is a Quad meeting that will occur later this year in India. President Trump plans to travel to India for that Quad meeting. That is the Quadrennial Defense Dialogue, where the U.S., India, Australia, and Japan talk about security issues in the broader Indo-Pacific. And so J.D. Vance, I'm sure, is putting his toe in the water to talk about, a bit about that right now. But, your previous guest who just spoke, talked about U.S. and India kind of, allying against China. China just announced that any trade agreements that are bad for China in the long run, China will retaliate against those. So now when we talk about U.S.-India relations, we also need to consider triangular relations. That is U.S., India, and China, because China definitely is a factor kind of wedging in there.
Okay. Pathakrit, J.D. Vance is in India, and these conversations are highly important considering the fact that diplomatically India has salvaged the situation. India has also gone on to the extent saying that these negotiations cannot be held, Pathakrit, at gunpoint. This doesn't seem to be a conversation which is going to happen under a gunpoint. This seems to be a soft angle, from what I understand, that is being adopted by the American Vice President.
Well, Vineet, first and foremost, similar pressures were there in 2018 as well. But I think, that time also there were pressure due to CAATSA sanctions, and India went ahead and took the S-400 air defense system from Russia. There was a 2+2 dialogue, and India made it very clear as to why India requires those things, in spite of the Trump administration having sanctions for any organization, country dealing with Russia, Iran, or Korea. So let me tell you on the issue of the trade negotiations, there are the negotiations are about hard bargains. So the Vice President, when he comes, definitely he is carrying forward certain message from the Trump administration. But I don't think just because he is here, suddenly the trade negotiations will get fastened or quickened. It will take its own time. So far as your question is concerned, look, it is a given that India will not open up its agriculture sector, poultry sector, fishery, dairy. There's no question of it. You might have some premium products coming in high-end departmental store. That's it. Nothing more than that. If the real concern of Trump administration is about the deficit, then yes, India can import a little more about of its energy requirements. But at the same time, look at what India is offering. That is also something that has to be considered. The Civil Liability of Nuclear Damage Act that India is taking care of, which gives huge opportunity for American companies who have up till now not invested in India's nuclear energy sector to develop small modular reactors. Organizations like Holtec are collaborating with L&T. That is a huge area potential area for investment for the American companies. Second is invariably the new name of Initiative for Critical and Emerging Technology, where there are collaborations for quantum computing. There are collaborations for AI, biotechnology. Now it is called TRUST after PM Modi and President Trump met. It's called Transforming Relationship Utilizing Strategic Technology. So of course, for future generation technologies, there will be collaboration. But let's understand, both Prime Minister Modi and President Trump wants manufacturing to happen in their own countries. So there will be give and take invariably. Now, if the Americans want more access to the Indian market, then India has two things in mind. First and foremost, yes, it has to take care of protect the interest of its own farmers. There are more than, say, 10 to 15 crore, which means 150 million people involved. The other thing is that if you want more access to my market, you also have to reciprocate and give more access to your market. That is one thing that I think will be made very clear. The other issue is, if you look at the larger dimension of how much the American companies earn revenue from India, then invariably you have to take into consideration the revenue of big tech American companies, whether it's the Amazons or the Google or the Twitter, or which is now called X, or Google or Microsoft, and the amount of revenue they churn from India. If you consider that, not just in India's case, but any country's sake, then invariably United States doesn't have a trade deficit with any country. You just can't talk about goods only and keep aside services. That is something that has to be kept in mind. So far as China is concerned, look, it is very clear there's a realignment of supply chains happening. Many American companies would want to diversify their supply chain. Many would want to come to India. Most welcome, because there are many areas of convergence between India and United States, and it's a given. We share cultural values. We are comfortable in each other's countries, and there is no doubt about it. The Americans have given opportunity for Indians to thrive. No problem with that. But India will not get into the trade war between United States and China. Okay, and I think the Trump administration understands it very well. India has a very, very decoupled foreign policy. You can call it an independent foreign policy, just as United States is a very, very valued strategic partner. So is BRICS, which has been brought up with a lot of sweat and hard work, because we have this perpetual problem of sanctions being threatened on us. It has happened in the past. So that legacy, keeping in mind, Trump is very, very, let me tell you that Trump is very popular in India because he's dismantling wokeism. And many people in India respect him for that. But when it comes to the issue of, BRICS, I think India is very sensitive with that. India has never allowed BRICS to operate against the United States. India has never said that it's an anti-Western thing. India has always said that this is a non-Western bloc. And there's large opportunity for it to collaborate with the United States and Western countries as well. There's no problem with BRICS and G7 to tomorrow having a joint summit. And I think there are challenges India has with China when it comes to dumping. It has to regulate, monitor. Majority of the Chinese apps are banned in India. We trust American technology, but I think China is too big to be ignored at the same time. So if there are issues, India would deal it definitely on its own, as it has always done, rather than becoming a bloc with the United States and getting into that war, which it would want to avoid for the time being. So this is where it is. Yes, there will be certain concessions India would also give, because America is willing to give certain concessions. But can you just give me 10 more seconds?
Yeah.
I think we are not too much concerned about that 26%. Let me tell you why. Our entire export of goods to United States is less than 2% of our GDP, and the impact level is only $30 billion. $30 billion in its own term is big, but as percentage of a $4.3 trillion GDP, it is less than 1%. So it does impact, but it doesn't devastate us, because we are not an export-oriented economy. So India does have the leverage to negotiate. We are not under compulsion or scared that we have to do or we will get devastated. That is the standpoint for which negotiations are happening. Back to you, Vinay.
Ambassador Goel, let's also talk about the strategic and the defense cooperation. India-American partnership is also driven by the fact that there is a mutual concern with both the countries when it comes to China's growing influence on the Indo-Pacific region and regional security. What percentage would you give this particular facet when it comes to both seeing eye to eye, when it comes to getting along trade-wise as well? Ambassador Goel?
I'm on the mute. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Vinay, that's a good question. You see, the problem is that when we begin to look at India-China relations or India-U.S. relations from the prism of the third country, we will always land into problems. China is our neighbor, both in subcontinental borders and also in maritime space. Please recall that historically we have had interactions, even going back to the Chola empires, with Sangha coming to the Indian coast, and these have not been easy journeys. Therefore, we have to look at China not just as a kind of country globally, looking for the global power, but also as India's big neighbor. And that is important. And we must also remember that when quadrilateral dialogue was established, even though the idea first came from the Japanese Prime Minister, but the USA showed interest because USA thought that India's presence was important in terms of countering the expanding or growing Chinese interest, Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific. Having taken these two factors into account, to pin the entire relationship with China on just this factor could actually land us into problems. Therefore, when we talk with China, we need to be cognizant that China is trying to outrival us in terms of the regional influence, in terms of global presence. We need to be cognizant of the fact that President Trump, mercurial that he is, and he has been talking over the last 2 or 3 days about the big deal that China could offer to India, to the USA. And if the big deal comes, we do not know what the big deal is going to be about. But the point is that if Trump does think that he's getting from China what he's looking for, his adversarial position to China could get moderated. Therefore, strategically, India is important for the USA from the point of view of China. But we do not have to play the same game and say that in this entire matrix, our importance is arising because of China. We need to do something more. Therefore, we say like global South. We talk about G20. We talk about the other plurilateral platforms, which are important for India's own strategic calculus. I don't know whether I'm being clear, but the point really here is that we have to play a very careful game in the whole thing and not let it appear that we are preparing to play the entirely American game as far as China is concerned.
Well said, sir. I agree with the point that you make and the term that you use, the American game. Quintin, there have also been a number of geopolitical differences between both these countries. There's strategic fragility, if I can call it that, between these two countries as well, which has more or less, solidified over the last few years, but it is not completely okay. The Americans have had a problem with India buying oil from Russia. India has had a problem with the tacit support that Pakistan has given Pakistan from time to time. But regardless of these differences, do you think there is perhaps a new leaf that could be turned over with Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi, sharing this incredible Born-Homian chemistry?
I think it's already been turned over. I think there's every evidence to suggest that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump not just have a great relationship this administration, but that they've had a great relationship since President Trump's first administration. Let's remember, President Trump has only been in office 3 months, almost exactly to the day. And the vice president and the president have both met with the Prime Minister of India. So that's a very significant thing to think about with the two countries. I don't really put much stock into the fact that, well, India gets most of their natural gas and oil from Russia. Well, so do a lot of European countries. So that's really not, I don't think, going to be a deterrent between the United States and India. I think, if anything, that creates more of an opportunity for the United States, which President Trump has made it very clear that one of his biggest complaints with a lot of countries is that they're not taking United States sourced oil and gas. So there's a tremendous opportunity here. I also want to say that it's not just India that has the opportunity. It's the United States that also has an opportunity with India. India is a rapidly growing market, has well-to-do consumers. And if you look at some American companies, very prominent companies like Apple, Google, IBM, Cisco, Microsoft, the list goes on, that are expanding their investment, expanding their footprint in India for that very reason. So it's not just the two administrations that are very, very close. a lot of American companies are starting to see that there's an opportunity in India. So the two countries, I think, are going to have a very bright future together, tied at the hip, at least economically.
Fabulous. That sounds extremely affirmative. Pathakrit, in fact, another concern, in fact, I would want Elizabeth to respond after you address my question. Of late, there have been concerns about, visas as well, that Indians are getting or not getting. There is also this matter of Indian students in the United States. Is that something that is likely to come up as a conversation between the US Vice President and Prime Minister Modi?
If it does come.
Yeah, that's for Pathakrit. Quinton, that's for Pathakrit. I'll come back to you.
Look, Vinit, let me put it very bluntly. United States
and let me also slip in the way some of the Indian immigrants were deported.
No, I think that issue was taken up, and I think that has been taken care of. But United States.
No, but the people still being deported, Pathakrit. The people still being deported.
No, yeah. So that is a policy of government of United States, and everyone will have to abide by that. If people have gone there illegally, or if they are doing something which doesn't suit to the American interest, they have every right to take action. I think similar actions are being taken by India as well. And just as India would not want a third country or a second country to interfere into the internal affairs of India, similarly, the same goes for the Americans. I think the Indians will take up an issue or the government if there is a discrimination that Indians are being deported only and others are not being deported. But if there are cases of illegals who have gone there deliberately taking the illegal route to go to United States, then I think, even as an Indian, I will say I am against that. If you've gone there as a student, you go there as a student. You can't say that I have a fundamental right to stay back for my next 7 generations. That cannot happen. That era is over. So you've got to respect that country's rules and regulations. And then if they allow you to stay because of certain reasons, well and good. But if you are not allowed to stay beyond a certain point, then you can't say that you have been, punished or you have been treated badly. Any kind of, if you are being handcuffed, then I think that is something that is not good. I think those issues will be taken up. But I think India, being a country with the third largest ecosystem for startups in the world, I think if you look at the largest perspective of government of India, it would not be very unhappy if they have a far more restrictions on H-1B visa, because it creates the repository of talent to create startups within the country, which is already happening. Now, let me tell you 2 more opportunities if you just give me a little more time. See, the 100% FDI in insurance that India has now opened up, I think it creates major opportunity for the American companies. I think there are certain defense deals that can still happen, even though India is very, very clear that in the long run, all major defense programs will be built in India. Probably there's a requirement of a few more PATI Poseidons and a few other things. But on the larger context, I look at this visit as work in progress. We can't expect miracles out of it. Some of the issues will be taken up. Some of the concerns even of United States will be, conveyed perhaps, because I don't think a president or a vice president of any country is ever on a permanent vacation. So even when he's on a vacation, he has an agenda. He comes with a purpose. That is a given. And I'm sure issues of Bangladesh will be discussed. I am sure issues of certain other things. There will be many things, Vinit, that will be discussed that will never come out, that will never be divulged in the press brief. And that is how the meetings of the presidents or the prime ministers happen. Look, this relationship is not just about trade. This relationship is far more profound than that. This relationship, just as it is not just about China either, it is about the future of the largest and the oldest democracy of the world. So when we are talking about a 50-year roadmap, how it should be, there will be certain issues. There will be teething problems. And I think both the countries will try to ignore at times, or will try to create certain concessions for each other. But that will not create problem for the long-term strong relationship that these two countries have. And I strongly believe that the dismantling of wokeism or organizations like USAID that Trump has done, I think there's a lot of support for that in India. And that's another topic. I don't want to get into that. But the issue is this visit is important. And my last point is this. Look, we are culturally different. It is a reality. But J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance, having his larger extended family with Indian connection, might act as a bridge, because as part of the Trump administration, he would have a better understanding of how Indian cultures work, how Indians actually work. It doesn't mean that others don't understand. So because he, for example, if he visits an Indian temple, his understanding of Indian spirituality, his understanding of how Indians are emotionally connected to something is far better, perhaps, a little better, perhaps, than others. So I think that will act as a bridge in terms of the administration back in United States, while taking care of the American concerns, will realize that it is in the long-term interest of American interest to keep Indian interest in mind as well. Because as a country, we are neither a tool of anybody, nor we ever backstab. That is the long-term, or I think that is the ethos that we have. So I think this visit is important, but let's not expect miracles out of it. First, National Director of National Intelligence came, Tulsi Gabbard. Then the Vice President coming. That shows the importance being given, and that is why if there are small nitty-gritty problems, I think that will be kept aside. Those are not for the Prime Ministers or Vice Presidents to discuss. There are strategic issues that will be discussed invariably, and I think this is a very, very good, visit. India being a country with
Okay, all right. Well, we are getting breaking news that U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has reached the Prime Minister's residence, and the bilateral between the two is going to take place shortly. Focus is obviously going to be on trade, tariffs. This is a very crucial conversation between the two, and all eyes will be on what is going to be the outcome of this conversation between the Prime Minister and Mr. J.D. Vance. Elizabeth, let me in fact take a reaction from you on what Pathakrit said, that the visa issue, though may be a thorn, it is not going to be a defining motif, if we can call it that, between these two countries. Obviously, with Donald Trump coming in just 3 months ago, there is a lot to be crossed. There are a lot of milestones to be achieved. It will be extremely premature to judge what India and the United States are capable of in the next 4 odd years.
Of the U.S.-India relationship. I think once the wrinkles, will get smoothed out, there will be a smoother path for H-1B visa seekers. Vice President J.D. Vance is in favor of it. Elon Musk, who still has some political, capital and influence, he's in favor. Wall Street Journal is. And so you look at the heavy hitters that are in favor of H-1B visas, you tend to think that the odds would be in their favor. And also, don't forget, of course, that not only do the U.S. and India share trade relations in terms of goods, but also in terms of services. The United States, will, in all likelihood moving forward, integrate India more into its supply chain, particularly as we can see U.S.-China relations deteriorating. U.S. is looking to friend shore a lot of supply chains. A lot of American businesses are investing more in India. There's a lot more tourism between U.S. and Indians. Indians, I believe, are the largest group of tourists to come to the United States. The U.S. is the largest group of tourists to go to India. And so there's a lot of trade in services, I think, that can continue, that will further draw the two countries together.
Ambassador Goyal, yet again, India is not the India anymore which is going to fall under any kind of a trap. We have held our own for the longest time, be it the S-400 missiles or be it buying oil from Russia, and very carefully and with a very dexterous approach, for the lack of a better word, India has carved out this niche as a master negotiator. In fact, Donald Trump personally said the same thing about the Prime Minister, that he's a very good negotiator. Do you think, with a reputation like this and the ambition that India has of being a Vishwaguru, America is the only ally we need at this point in time, and making sure that our differences do not become our enemies is going to be the main priority for both the leaders?
Vineet, if you permit me, I would like to just go back to the last question you asked about on the visas for the Indian students. I know that maybe I'm covering some of the ground repeatedly, but it's important issue. So give me 1 minute on that really. I have grown through the 70s and 80s as a young university graduate. And I remember that when I finished my MSc Physics from Delhi University, one of the aspirations every young graduate had was to go to an American university, do his MS or PhD from there, and mind you, at that was the time when there were very few opportunities for research, etc., available in India. And the dream was that they will get their PhD from an American university and uh, be able to work at an American institution. That was the dream at that time, and many got their dreams fulfilled. Number one. Number two, please look at the relationship between India and the USA. Not over the last 1 decade, but ever since the nuclear agreement was signed, ever since EAM Jaswant Singh began to speak to the Deputy Secretary of State, Trevor, in the USA on India's aspirations. It happened basically because, please remember, the very powerful, the very influential lobby of the American Indian, or the Indian Americans, whichever way you want to call them, who were able to cast their influence in both the Senate and the Congress and with the Republicans and the Democrats. And even today, those lobbies continue to work with India in terms of carrying our own desires, our own aspirations. Important thing beneath is that the India-U.S. relationship, even during the days of the height of the Cold War, was not just a unidimensional democracy or anything. It was a very aspirational relationship, and the Indian youth looked at the USA as a kind of an ideal they would aspire to. Today, the number of Indian students who are going to the USA has declined by 20%, if I'm not mistaken. The visa issues, they are being declined. Today, the tourism from India to the USA has declined. Now, I'm not saying that the American government does not have the right to issue the visas or not to issue the visas. But the point is that those who are already there studying in the last year of their graduate course, and they are being sent back because they had a traffic accident or because basically there are minor scuffles with the police. Most of these who are actually being deported, more than 300, they are not being deported because they were political activists, but they are being deported because they have a minor infraction of law, which can happen in any university. Therefore, my own feeling is that even though it is not the word you used earlier, monumental thing, but the fact is, it is an important factor, and I'm quite certain that it will mention not for just today, but because our relationship depends on the youth of the two countries. Having said that now, coming to the question that you asked about the strategic dimension of India-U.S. relationship. I think today, look at the world's situation, when we are again essentially descending into, or not descending, transforming into a completely new world order. The earlier order post World War II is diminishing. Now it's gone. And the European dependence on NATO, to my belief, has come down so much that even if they continue to have a NATO, it will be completely different, which may not have the same strong links with the USA as before. Middle East, see what is happening there. China and Southeast Asia. Some people say that despite Chinese visit, Xi Jinping's visit to Malaysia, etc., they are going to remain closer to the USA. I've served in Southeast Asia for 10 years. And I know for one thing that Southeast Asia, if they have not been able to sign a code of conduct so far, it's basically because they cannot escape the Chinese influence. I'm using the word influence in a very minor sense, really, but it is actually the Chinese stronghold over the demographics of Southeast Asian countries. Therefore, in the new strategic game in the world, China will continue to aspire for the role as a world superpower. USA will continue to challenge it. Let us see what happens economically and in the CNP area. Southeast Asia, Indo-Pacific will continue to be the theater of action for this rivalry. Europe is losing its importance slowly. But let us see what happens after Ukraine, because that's a defining situation. So on the whole, we are looking at a kind of game or a chessboard where all the pieces have been relayed in a completely different fashion. And the two sides do not know what to do again in future. Lot of uncertainty.
All right, sir. All right, sir. My colleague Brian is also joining us at this point in time. Brian, we just broke the latest between in the bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and Vice President J.D. Vance. Their meeting is about to start any minute. A ceremonial guard of honor is, of course, is what is on your screens, and the Vice President also visited the Akshardham Temple on the border of Delhi, Noida. It's a crucial meet, Brian. Lots at stake, and this visit, could be considered, a game changer of sorts, considering the fact that the world and India find themselves in the thick of the tariff wars. Brian?
Well, Vineet, definitely, this is going to be a very strong visit, and it will definitely strengthen the ties between both US and India. And definitely, it is a very anticipated visit also. Earlier he touched down on the Palam Air Base. Then post that he went to the Akshardham, he seek blessings there. He was there for a while now. Then he again, after that, he went to the hotel. And then very importantly, he also visited the Janpath Emporial as well. And now he just reached the 7 Lok Kalyan mark to meet the Prime Minister ahead of his visit. Also tomorrow he will be going to Jaipur, then Agra. Definitely this 4 days is going to be very important in terms of strengthening the ties, and also very importantly the conversation between both two nations, Vice President and Prime Minister, will focus on trade and tariffs also. Now, the primary focus of the meeting will be to advance discussions on a bilateral trade agreement, where India is even, Vineet, aiming to finalize the initial phase of this agreement by autumn 2025, which will very importantly include reducing tariffs on over half of its $41.8 billion imports from 2024. The initiatives will also be seeking to prevent the imposition of steep US tariffs and to double bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030. It will also be vitalizing and enhancing increasing trade volumes itself. They will be also talking about defense and technology cooperation. The leaders are also expected to discuss enhanced defense ties, which will include your potential procurement and co-production of US defense equipments. Additionally, cooperation in emerging technologies such as your AI or drone technology under initiatives like the ASIA and Trust will also be on the agenda. Very importantly, another very important that they might talk about will be the immigration and visa policies. Given the significant number of Indian professionals working in the US, these discussions may also cover immigration policies, particularly concerning the H-1B visas. India may very importantly also seek assurances on visa stability in exchange for cooperation on deporting illegal Indian immigrants as well. There would be a meeting that would also address regional security cooperation concerns, including the Indo-Pacific security.
All right, Brian, appreciate you joining us. We'll keep coming back to you. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who joined in and, in fact, put in a perspective that we can all use and perhaps delve over, because this meeting has just started. We'll continue to talk about this on the other side.
अगर आप बनना चाहते हैं एंकर, या फिर आप में है जुनून एक तेज तर्रार न्यूज रिपोर्टर बनने का, तो आप ज्वाइन करें ITV और इंडिया न्यूज़ का मीडिया स्कूल। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल का कोर्स आपको मौका देता है देश के दिग्गज एंकर्स के साथ काम करने का। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल में आप बेहद नजदीकी से देख पाएंगे किस तरह से ITV नेटवर्क के दिग्गज पत्रकारों की टीम दिन रात खबरों पर काम करती है। इस कोर्स के दौरान आप सीखेंगे एंकरिंग की एक एक बारीकी उन एंकर्स के साथ जो देश को रखते हैं हर खबर से बाखबर। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल का ये कोर्स आपके एंकरिंग स्किल्स को करेगा इतना सशक्त, मजबूत, जिससे आप बनेंगे पत्रकारिता की दुनिया का वो चमकता चेहरा जो दुनिया देखेगी और पसंद करेगी। अगर आप बनना चाहते हैं एंकर या फिर आप में है जुनून एक तेज तर्रार न्यूज रिपोर्टर बनने का, तो आप ज्वाइन करें ITV और इंडिया न्यूज़ का मीडिया स्कूल। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल का कोर्स आपको मौका देता है देश के दिग्गज एंकर्स के साथ काम करने का। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल में आप बेहद नजदीकी से देख पाएंगे किस तरह से ITV नेटवर्क के दिग्गज पत्रकारों की टीम दिन रात खबरों पर काम करती है। इस कोर्स के दौरान आप सीखेंगे एंकरिंग की एक एक बारीकी उन एंकर्स के साथ जो देश को रखते हैं हर खबर से बाखबर। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल का ये कोर्स आपके एंकरिंग स्किल्स को करेगा इतना सशक्त, मजबूत, जिससे आप बनेंगे पत्रकारिता की दुनिया का वो चमकता चेहरा जो दुनिया देखेगी और पसंद करेगी।
All right, starting with some breaking story. 2611 Mumbai attack accused Tariffs Rana has submitted an application requesting permission to communicate with his family members. In response, the Delhi Patiala House Court has issued a notice to the NIA regarding his plea. The court is scheduled to hear arguments on the matters on the 23rd April. Sambhav Sharma, my colleague, is joining us on the broadcast to give us more details about this. Sambhav?
Well, absolutely. The matter was in NIA court, wherein the court had issued a notice on Tariffs Rana's application, a petition requesting a permission to communicate with his members. This is the petition of Tariffs Rana, a 11 mastermind and accused in the matter, and the court has slated the matter hearing for the arguments on April 23rd because it's an NIA court, a special court, and he is in the NIA.
All right. Sambhav, appreciate you joining us. All right, US Vice President J.D. Vance is on his very first visit to India. He's at the 7 Lok Kalyan Marg, Prime Minister's residence. And now all eyes are trained on the crucial bilateral meeting. Remember, Vice President Vance's visit comes after US President Donald Trump imposed and then paused a sweeping tariff regime against 60 countries. It also comes in the wake of New Delhi and Washington holding negotiations to seal a bilateral trade agreement that is expected to address a variety of issues, including tariff and market access. As India and the United States eye augmenting bilateral trade to $500 billion, the Modi-Vance meeting is expected to pave the way for deeper cooperation in various sectors, including defense, technology and trade. Is all set to send a team of 5 to 6 negotiators led by Additional Commerce Secretary Rajesh Agarwal to the United States on the 23rd of April. We'll talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the show is Ambassador Deepak Vora, former diplomat, Mrs. Scott Faulkner, head of Eagle Enterprises, Martin Sa Erez, foreign affairs expert, is also with us. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, former diplomat, joins us on the show as well. Mika Pickers, US foreign policy expert, also with us on the broadcast. Ambassador Vora, I'll begin with you, sir. Well, you know, the Vice President is in India. He was on a personal trip, but when you are, a breath away from the presidency of the United States, you possibly cannot take a break. This is obviously a good opportunity for the Prime Minister of India as well as the Vice President to pick on each other's brains and understand what we can avoid and what we cannot avoid. According to you and your long career as a diplomat and somebody who understands the granularities of this association, what is going to be the priority? And like they say in colloquial Mumbaiya, Vance pe chance is perhaps the keyword today.
Well, thank you very much, sir. Always a pleasure to be with you. And you, of course, yourself are a foreign service kid, so you understand better than many of us do what is going on. Let me put it to you, you've used the term private visit. We wouldn't give him a guard of honor if it was an entirely private visit. There's an official element. There's an element of privateness, so to speak, in the visit because he's brought his 3 kids along. And look at the dignity and grace with which they went to Akshardham. By the way, that temple represents the essence of Sanatan Dharma. across the world. They have so many. They went there straight, and I could see the kids wearing kurta pajama. It looked very nice. It was very good to bring the family along with them. All this thing about discovering their roots, etc. Essentially, let me put it to you like this, sir. 52 years in diplomacy and counting, I've never seen this velocity of circulation of contacts between India and the United States. I've served there. We had President Donald Trump speak to the Prime Minister soon after his election. Then we had the visit of the Prime Minister. Then we had External Affairs Minister present at President Donald Trump's inauguration. Our Prime Minister went there. Then we had the Director of National Intelligence come here. We had NSA's meeting. We now have the Finance Minister somewhere, our Finance Minister in San Francisco. We are talking about essentially a new level of relationship, a quantum leap. Let me put it to you like this, sir. What does the United States want from India? Essentially our market and our support in its contestation, I'm not saying conflict, with China. We are a swing country. Now, President Donald Trump did use some language saying that, so many fellows have been calling me and they are kissing my whatever. And so I've decided to suspend these tariffs for some time, etc. If we are going to get a deal, and we are, there's no doubt about it, then that becomes a plus point, a talking point, telling the other fellows, look, I have a deal with the third or fourth largest economy in the world, with one of the world's most important powers. What's wrong with you fellows? Why can't you do the same with me? It gives him an advantage as far as the weightage on his side is concerned. For us, we were the first movers. And I believe that we are going to get, I don't know if it's going to be zero tariff, but we are going to get a trade deal that is acceptable and beneficial to both sides. And it's going to come quicker than you can say Donald Trump and Narendra Modi. It's going to come very, very quickly. I would be very excited. I'd be very happy to see that happen, because this relationship, sir, whatever the cobwebs of the past, I believe with the dark state or whatever you call it having been dismantled, now I believe nothing can stop us. Somebody asked me, is the sky the limit in the relationship? Buddy, there is no limit in this relationship.
Absolutely right, sir. Mr. Scott Faulkner is also with us on the program. Scott, appreciate you being here, and good to have you on the show once again. Well, JD Vance is in New Delhi at this point in time. I'm going to take a leaf out of what Ambassador Vora also said, that both the countries need each other. The Americans need access to our markets. We obviously need the American support when it comes to a number of geopolitical issues as well. And the Americans also need the Indian support when it comes to their geopolitical needs and insecurities. How do you think this relationship is likely to pan out now that you have an affirmative, a positive approach from both the leaders, the Vice President as well as the Prime Minister, going into this bilateral?
I think all roads lead through India in terms of Trump's engagement with China, in terms of his trying to totally reinvent our supply chain, to bring certain key industries back into the United States, but then taking other key industries outside of China. India is going to be the location of choice. The relationship that Trump has personally with Modi, obviously JD Vance has an Indian wife, Usha, and children who are embracing their Indian heritage. So I think that, just like the ambassador just said, I think we're about to have a golden age for India in the world, and certainly a golden age of India with the United States.
Okay, let me in fact rope in Martin also in this conversation as well. Martin, India and America, of course, paving the way for the future in terms of trade and bonhomie. Despite our differences, be it buying oil from Russia, or not supporting the Americans when it comes to resolutions against Russia at the UN, it still seems to be an association which is friendly in nature. Martin, you're muted.
Diplomacy is not in the same way than the trade relations, but actually I have a very positive feeling since President Modi has the same, is a conservative like Donald Trump, and actually this time is a perfect time for strengthen U.S. and India's relationships, because we are in a, right now we are in a cold trade war. The U.S. is very afraid of China having influence in Asia, and actually I see that there's a huge potential for negotiations. We need to remember India and the US are working towards finalizing the initial phase of bilateral trade agreement by autumn 2025, and India has expressed willingness to reduce tariffs on over half of its 40 billion worth of 2024. So I think imports from the US are aiming to double bilateral trade by 2030. So I think it's a very positive trend.
All right, some breaking news coming in. JD Vance and Prime Minister Modi and their bilateral has started, and the bilateral is likely to focus on trade, tariffs, and crucial elements of the relationship between both these great nations. I'm going to go back to Ambassador Deepak Vora as well. Ambassador Vora, obviously it's important for us to focus on the positive. We are going to look at the half glass full over here, but a lot of people who are being deported or are not getting visas or are not getting the support that they're so used to when it comes to Indian companies in the United States are going to feel the heat. Is this conversation also going to be about them? Let's not forget, sir, that for the longest period of time, the Americans have welcomed Indian technocrats, if I can call it, to their country and used them to prosper.
There's no doubt about it. These are irritants in a bilateral relationship. There's never a perfect relationship between two countries. Even though you hop into bed together, it's not ever darling, darling, sweetheart, sweetheart. There will be minor irritants. I've been married, my wife and I, for 48 years. I don't have another one. I have one. And we do have these minor irritants. Nevertheless, the macro relationship is very strong, very stable. Why are you cooking this? Why are you eating this? Why are you wearing? All that will go on. But basically, sir, America is the world's greatest technology supplier. They have technology that we want, whether it's medical or it's in education, or it's in space, or it's in defense, or it's under the sea. We don't need to reinvent that. Yes, of course, the Americans also realize that if you deny it to us, as they did to us with the cryogenic technology, we'll build it ourselves. And we Indians are very smart. And then America needs, if I may say so, human resource. Talented human. Sir, we have two kids, my wife and I, and we've gifted both to the United States. Both are what you would call in some sense technocrats. They're very happy in the United States. I have two granddaughters. They consider America their home. They were little, they would say, sweetheart, where are you going? Oh, grandpa, we are going back to Manerica. They couldn't say America, we're going to Manerica. That is our home. Sir, this is the openness of American society. I spent 3.5 years posted there. I go twice in a year. It's a very welcoming society. And now we are beginning to realize the full potential. People-to-people contact is very good, but the important thing, I believe, is that we get what we need, they get what they need. We don't even intend to supplant them as number one in the world as China is attempting to do. We're just telling them, give us what we want, help us to become your most reliable partner in Asia. Let me put it to you like this, sir. Something about growing Chinese influence. I don't believe a word of it. See what's happened to Sri Lanka. See what's happening in the Maldives. See what's happening in Nepal. See what's happening in Myanmar. China was making inroads. Wherever they've gone, they've left a trail of blood. And then India has to go in and clean it up. America understands this very well. If there's one country that they leave out this neighbor of ours who keeps fighting with us because that's his destiny, he claims. Leave him out, but everybody else understands that if a cleaning up has to be done, if there has to be trust, then the one country they trust totally is India, sir, in our neighborhood.
Mr. Faulkner, do you concur that times have definitely changed? India is aggressive, India is ambitious, and the fact of the matter is, regardless of how good a friend you are, I mean, look at the relationship between the Americans and the Canadians today. You are practically picking up the spears against each other. It's normal to live through these differences. It's also normal to quantify these differences. But what's most important, and something that the Americans can learn from the Indians, is, sir, that despite your differences, you can still prosper and be friends.
Oh, absolutely. But also you have to understand Trump's negotiating style. I mean, he clearly rose up in his to become a billionaire and to become prominent as a national leader in the real estate market of Manhattan in New York City. And that's a very sharp elbows, push people around kind of environment. And so his Art of the Deal, which a lot of people have read and should read, he literally starts with his most brutal opening, and then he eases back. And I think that's what we're seeing with these tariff wars around the world, is that he he basically threw down a gauntlet that was a lot of people viewed as extreme, and now he's rolling back as he's negotiating with everybody. That's his style. Everybody's gotten used to it, and I think that India will benefit from it.
Mr. Faulkner, how do you think Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump complement each other when it comes to, their personalities?
They clearly have a warm personal relationship. I think as you look at Trump's interaction with other Western leaders, I mean, he just had the Italian Prime Minister there. They certainly had a warm relationship. He clearly has a close relationship with the Prime Minister of Israel, and certainly several people, El Salvador, Argentina. But when it comes to the first tier of leaders in the world, Modi and Trump's relationship is probably the closest in certainly recent history.
Right. Martin, your views on a new world order which is obviously going to be led by India. But there's this China question also that keeps popping up, isn't it? Should both the countries take China with them? Do we have to work against China? Let's not forget, the muscle flexing and the posturing that China continues to do militarily against countries like Taiwan and smaller countries that it has lent money to. That is obviously a concern which the Americans share with India.
I think India needs to take advantage of this situation, and actually think there's huge potential for good deals between the U.S. and India because of the China threat, let's call it like that. I don't think that China right now is a huge threat. It's a threat, but I think that with Donald Trump trying to gain a lot of popularity and a lot of cooperation with Asian countries, I think this is the opportunity for India to have mutual cooperation and have trade agreements that can be beneficial for both. I don't think India should be straightforward or go into a trade or a bellical war with China in a direct way, but I think India should be in the side of the US right now for its own interest. I think both governments are in the same way of thinking about geopolitics, about trade, about free market. So I think the main topics that India should put in the table is the avoidance of US tariffs by engaging in trade negotiations, increasing market access for Indian exporters with greater access to the US market, and energy and technology collaboration. I think those are essential topics in this new trade world order.
And Ambassador Vora, I take a lot of respite in the fact that when Hindus were being ill-treated in Bangladesh, it was Donald Trump who raised a voice. He was the sharp one out who picked out on the government in Bangladesh and said that this is not going to be tolerated. And in fact, he perhaps did that not to please India, but that just goes on to show you that this is the mark of a world leader, which Prime Minister Modi already is.
So these two people are not politicians. They are statesmen, sir. I'm talking about President Donald Trump and I'm talking about Prime Minister Narendra. They have a certain reputation. In that, whatever that morning consulting, it keeps giving you an assessment of the popularity of world leaders week to week. And Narendra Modi has been consistently over the last 3 years, because I see it every week, has been ranking very high. But let me tell you one other thing, sir, which to me is very significant. Now, President Donald Trump, when the two prime ministers met, the joint statement also, for the first time ever, referred to a certain country saying they have to contain terrorism, a third country, terrorism, etc., etc. And then President Trump referred to this Purana, whatever the fool's name is, as one of the very evil people, and he was going to send him back to India. Now, contrast this with those jokers across the pond, a country, I think it's called Little Britain, if I remember correctly. Many years ago, it was great. Now it's Little Britain. And we wanted these two economic offenders. This was 3 days ago, sir. Your channel covered it. We wanted them back. And some court there said, oh, please tell us which presidential suite you're going to put these prisoners in. Have these guys gone mad? 78 years ago, we booted them out of India, but they still think that they have some kind of influence. Whereas the United States, the Americans went, justice means justice. If a chap is an offender, he's committed a crime, he has to be punished. What is your concern about his, whether we are going to give him a Mercedes vehicle to receive him at the airport with police honors and so on and so forth? A proclaimed economic offender. These guys are funny. I don't even know they realize the message they're sending to the rest of the world, that they are becoming the fugitive capital of the world. I'm talking of London. By contrast, America has sent the message, and by deporting these Indians, terrible, you are shackling them, you're handcuffing them. But the message went out from the director of ICE. If you want to come to America legally, come. If you want to come illegally, this is what is going to happen to you. Don't come, because this is a system where justice is swift, justice is quick, and justice serves the purpose for which it is meant. Now this joker wants to speak to his family, and the court somewhere in India, good Lord, says, they want some kind of government response. What do you think? I don't know. I don't know what the government will respond. But the basic assessment is that wherever we have wanted, you remember, sir, there is that character called Jagmeet Singh or something like that in Canada, who's a big rebel and a chap who's conspiring against India. And the new director of the FBI, I saw this on X, which is owned by this chap, whom I call the king, the king of future technology, Elon Musk, who's coming here very quickly. And I saw on X that the new director of the FBI told this Jagmeet Singh that don't you dare come to the United States, we'll arrest you and deport you to India. So the fellow is hiding in a basement somewhere, he doesn't want to get up. Now this is the kind of thing that pleases us. This is the kind of thing that would please the United States if they wanted us to send a terrible fellow back to them, a very nasty fellow, we'd do it. But this is how the bilateral trust is maintained. Sir, I tell you, on a scale of 1 to 10, if I were to evaluate Americans' present relationship, Bharat and America, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would rank it at 15.
Okay, Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, also joins us. Professor Nalapat, we've been waiting for you eagerly and to understand and learn from you. What would this bilateral mean, considering the fact that there's been so much back and forth that has taken place in the last few weeks? When it comes to deportations, when it comes to tariffs, when it comes to geopolitical security, when it comes to wars, when it comes to the Middle East. What's your take on this bilateral, sir?
Look, the fact is that India or any other country is not exempt from any of those tariffs and deportations. The only point is that the percentage of Indian students deported is small. And most of them were deported because they went into altercations with the police. Now, in India, that may be commonplace, but it should not be in the U.S. So I'd like to say that a bulk of those cases are not because of any links to terror organizations. In fact, that's why even the small number surprised me at first. But because of altercations with the police, a lot of them are now under legal process. A lot of them have been temporarily stayed. I would like to tell you, the U.S., like India, is a country governed by the rule of law, and you have a very strong federal and state judiciary, and the students weren't there. And in many cases, the police cases were withdrawn. Sometimes police just file, almost without thinking, and if I may say so, that's not the case only with the United States. It happens in some other countries as well. You have to file cases very carefully because a case can have a devastating impact on an individual, and you have to think 9 times before you file a case, quite frankly. But I'd like to say that overall, the Vance visit is not just about optics. It's not just about Usha and J.D. Vance having a lovely time in India as tourists. There is a lot of serious business to be discussed, and I think the Vances made a very, very lovely start to their voyage, their voyage on the shores of India by going to the Akshardham temple, and also they are visiting, I'm told, Jaipur. But the most important thing by far, is the bilateral conversation he'll have with Prime Minister Modi, where the entire gamut of US-India relations is going to be discussed. And I can tell you, I am very hopeful the visit will end well. And, the reason is that Indian students or whatever, they have been very instrumental in the growth of the United States technology. And if the United States want to keep ahead of China, they will need people from India. So I'd like to say that Trump is a practical man. He understands that. I mean, look, he ran so many enterprises, and many of the enterprises, quite frankly, I mean, whether they checked all the legal documents of people they were employing, I'm not saying Donald Trump, but those working under him, well, possibly not. So he's a practical man. J.D. Vance is the Vice President of the United States. That's not a small job. As Scott will tell you, who's a tremendously keen observer of the United States and India, if I may say so. I know that Scott loves India, and I hope he'll come here very soon. But the reality is, it's a very important visit. A lot of substantive issues will be discussed, but don't expect all of them to come on the front page. I mean, I am amazed to find some former diplomats saying that, oh, that hasn't been publicly expressed. So, important. The fact is, a lot of things that are not publicly expressed are important, and that's something we need to remember. Thank you.
Well said, sir. Let's take a reaction from Scott. I know he loves India. In fact, I got to see that love when Scott was in India just a few weeks ago. And of course, it's important to understand the pathology of India when dealing with America. And Scott, it's obviously a bonhomie that is undeniable at this point in time.
Absolutely. I mean, again, any official visit is a combination of symbolism and substance. We've talked a lot about the substance, but when you realize that our vice president is married to an Indian, I mean, that's about as symbolic as it can get and substantive as it can get, is that he fell in love with an Indian woman. He has spends many hours, many days with her family, who are all from India. And so it's that marriage of love that is manifested in the vice president and Usha, I think is a strong symbol of the kind of marriage in love, in politics, and economics that is going to be evolving between India and the United States.
Martin, your reaction to what Professor Nalapat said, that this is not optics alone. I think we've gone beyond those days when optics did most of the foreign policy processing, but now it's right down to brass tacks.
Of course, the human and personal factor is a key factor. I mean, if you look at Donald Trump's profile and Modi's profile, both are trade people, both are businessmen, and both are traditional people who want the best for their countries. They are nationalist people. They usually have the support from people who are usually patriots. And yeah, the fact that Vance is married to an Indian lady it also shows that this is a personal also relationship. I mean, with politicians, it's not always about the formal protocols or the formal traits. Also, like the human fact can make huge impacts in trade agreements, in being closer to the politicians in a more human way. So I think it's absolutely amazing, this fact, and I think this will help a lot to increase and strengthen the relationship between India and the U.S.
And Ambassador Vora, taking a leaf out of what the other panelists have also said, that this marriage between Mr. Vance and of course his wife is Indian, and then the openness and the idea of democratic tolerance that it brings about has always existed in India. Do you think that has always been a platform, a founding pillar of great democracies, And regardless of what you take away from both these countries, that soul is definitely going to stay there.
No question about it. Where is Prime Minister hosting the dinner? At his house or at Hyderabad House? I think he's hosting it at his own residence. I can't recall when he did that before for any other visiting leader. A very special gesture he's making. I've also read somewhere that Vice President J.D. Vance had become an atheist, and then when he met his wife, he then rediscovered religion, so to speak, and has become a practicing Christian, which is great because we are Sanatanis. Akshardham, where they went, is the world's greatest example of Sanatan Dharam, which means all of you are welcome. Our doors are open for everybody. I believe that is a very powerful statement. More than that, sir, forgive me, but the Baron of Business, i.e. Donald Trump, is meeting the Nawab of Negotiation, i.e. Narendra Modi. The two of them will get along very well together. And the interlocutor, the intermediary in this process at this time is a person called J.D. Vance. On a very personal note, when I was posted in the United States, some of my friends used to, I don't remember why, but they would call me John. My name is Deepak Vora. My initials are DV. So if I had John, it would become JDV, and J.D. Vance is also JDV. I was joking about it with somebody today. I don't know why they call me John. Well, my name is Deepak Vora. So in any case, it was wonderful to listen to see him being received, to see him patting the parade commander on the shoulder and saying well done, etc. It was just wonderful. There wasn't a misstep anywhere, and I don't think there will be, sir. This is what friendship is all about. Minor hiccups, we'll overcome them, but the basic trust, the fundamentals must be very solid, which they are.
And Professor Nalapa, there is a churn in the United States happening at this point in time as well. Country first is the approach that Donald Trump has decided to take, and that's in a sense very similar or analogous to an emotion or a philosophy that the Prime Minister also alluded to when he came to power in 2014.
Well, you're perfectly right, if I may say so. You're perfectly right. And if I may point out, regarding Usha and JD, look, love, it doesn't happen by predetermination or something. It just happens. And the whole thing has been beautifully sketched by JD Vance in his really classic book, Hillbilly Elegy, which I would encourage everybody to read all over the world. The reality is, theirs is a love, a very strong love, and that love carried J.D. Vance through some difficult times in the college and university. And he is very open about the fact that he may have given up because somehow, despite being, quote unquote, in his own words, a hillbilly, he got admission to some of the best universities in the U.S. on sheer merit. Well, Usha helped him through that bad patch. I'm sure he's helped her through many bad patches. And if I may point out, Vineet, Usha Vance is about as Indian as Scott Falk now. The reality is, parents are from India. They went there a long term back, and she was born in California. So she's a native Californian. And everybody in the United States, almost, except for the original American Indians, frankly, they are all come from some location or the other. So if you track back the roots, then Scott may be English, and other friends may be other things, and of course multiple identities. But the reality is, Usha Vance is as American as apple pie. And if I may say so, apple, our halwa mithai, because the open welcome Americans give different cultures, mithai is also becoming a part of American culture. Thank you, Vinny.
Right, Ambassador Vora has something to say to or respond to.
I was going through my notes and I remember that when COVID hit the United States and President Donald Trump won, called it kung fu and all kinds of things. And then he asked us for remdesivir and paracetamol. We removed the ban and we sent as much as they wanted. And then he tweeted, sir, I have the tweet somewhere in my notes, that India has been great. We will never forget. That comes from the heart, that we needed it, you gave it to us. Even though we didn't have, we had to deny ourselves it. It didn't work, it didn't work. The fact is we responded as America responded many times over magnificently when we needed those oxygen generators and all that other stuff. And I was listening to our outstanding former ambassador, Ambassador T.S. Sadhu. He actually wrote that Americans were coming to him when we were really reeling under the Chinese virus, coming to him and saying, what more can we do for India? This is America, sir. This is the greatness of that country, the openness of their hearts. And this is also the openness of our own hearts. So there is no, I don't see any reason for conflict, sir. There shouldn't be. We're not going to hurt them. We hope they won't hurt us. So that's it, sir.
And Mr. Faulkner, do you also feel that Donald Trump has a resentment towards a lot of forums and organizations, including the NATO and the World Health Organization, that he feels have taken America for granted, taken the maximum amount of money and given them the least amount of protection and visibility and respect, and perhaps that's good enough reason for him to understand the virtue that India brings to the table. You get what you see.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Trump is a disruptor, and he is disrupting the entire world order because he's looking at it from a lens of America first. But he also recognizes that America cannot stand alone. And so when he looks out there and says, who out there can America depend on? Who out there is going to be part of America's inner circle as we move into the middle part of the 21st century? India is the place. And so India is about to enter into, I like to talk about the Go board. America plays whack-a-mole and checkers. A lot of the world plays chess. China plays Go. And America with India is going to dominate that Go board as they start to look at the mid part of this 21st century, economically, politically, militarily, culturally. America and India clearly have a strong bond on many fronts, and that bond's just going to get better.
Martin, do you concur with the resilience that India has shown, especially after COVID-19? We were one of the first few nations, to come back on track, after the entire world was dilapidated because of economic woes.
Yeah, so I think India should also be part of this trend of technology renovation. We need to remember in COVID, the US supplied with a lot of medical supply to India. And I think there's a good example of the benefits of being part of this deal with the US. I think India should cooperate more with the US. We need to remember the US is the larger beneficial of Indian trade. India exports generics in medicine, exports all kind of important supply in medicine too. So I think India should try to take advantage of this situation, expand its capacities of technology, and trying to make a deal so a free trade can be expanded with the US to lower the tariffs, to lower all of these barriers in free trade. So I think with these two leaders that believe in free trade, this can be possible.
Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, former diplomat, also joins us at this point in time. Ambassador Kapoor, thank you for being here, sir. Importance of this bilateral between the Vice President J.D. Vance and the Prime Minister. Of course, we have underscored a number of areas. A plethora of ideas have come through before you joined. But let's hear it from you as to why this is extremely crucial. I'm going to take a leaf out of what Professor Nalapat said, that this is not merely optics. I'm also going to take a leaf out of what Ambassador Vora said, that this is going to be the defining relationship for the next century.
Well, thank you very much. And I will be, trying not to repeat what the others have said, but it's not going to be easy because I've not been in on the talk for a long time. I think we'll have to mute Deepak Vora. That's better. Thank you. So I think this is a very important visit. It's going to mark a paradigm shift in our relationship because, if you look at J.D. Vance's current profile vis-a-vis President Trump, he is being given a lot of important assignments by the president, and he has been given a lot of leeway to take initiatives, to discuss matters, to present the American perspective globally and in the US. So J.D. Vance is going to be an important spokesperson for India. He will be like India's ambassador to the White House. If we are able to have a very substantial interaction with him. Now, having a person like J.D. Vance in the White House, inside the White House premises, whether he is doing, work from another wing of the White House, but all the same, it's still part of the White House. So, for us to have our spokesman, if we are able to, create that sort of profile vis-a-vis our interactions with him, for him to understand better the Indian cultural perspective, because what has been missing is some amount of sensitivity to each other's concerns, to each other's cultural backgrounds. So that sort of perspective, J.D. Vance can bring in very properly, very appropriately, because he has been married to this very outstanding young lady called Usha Chilukuri Vance, who comes from a great heritage of, her father being an IIT professor, her father being an IIT graduate, her grandfather being an IIT graduate and an IIT professor. I don't know whether he was a graduate, but he was an IIT professor. And I am from the IIT, so I can understand what her background is like and what she brings to the table. Now, if she is in that household 24/7, and J.D. Vance will have a lot of better understanding, because to negotiate with Indians is not an easy matter for any other delegation in the world, because we have our egos, we have our systems, we have our preferences, we have our cultural heritage, we have our great cultural arrogance also in a way, which we do not articulate. Now, for him to have understood all that, having been married to Usha Vance and sharing 3 kids together, I think he brings a lot of value to the negotiations for both the countries, for India and for the US. So for him to be the representative of the US in India and in a way, articulating India's voice, India's concerns in the US, inside the White House, in the NSA, in the important bodies, in the strategic area, in the space, in the geostrategic space, in the geopolitical space, amongst the think tanks, amongst the senior officials, whenever they have meetings at the White House. I think it's a very, very important visit. And for him to have this exposure, for Usha to come in as the vice president's spouse, as the second lady, to bring in her children and to be accorded that sort of welcome by India, I think it's a very great, move at this stage, at the early stage of the Trump administration. They're just 2 months old into the White House. So for J.D. Vance to have come in so early into his career as vice president, to have very intense interactions with India, is going to be an extremely important, meeting, which is going to have a long-lasting sort of impact, and it will continue to benefit our relationship in a very big way. So we have to be very clear on the table. We have to be very sensitive to the US concerns, but we also have to articulate how the two countries, in our opinion, in our view, can work together, because a lot of the breaking India forces and the breaking US forces are similar at this point of time. And for us to tackle those forces together is going to be the most important aspect for the world, for India and for the US. Thank you.
Professor Nalapat, great points, Ambassador Kapoor. Professor Nalapat, regardless of what happened during COVID, it's important to understand that, both these countries suffered a lot during that phase. And there's been a history of India doing extremely well when it comes to Republican presidents. Would you attribute anything to that reality and that fact?
Well, the fact is that Prime Minister Modi has, from 2014 onwards, that time Trump was not president, but ever since Trump became president, Trump 1.0, the reality is that he had a very close relationship with Donald Trump, and a much better relationship, if I may say so, than he had with President Biden. And frankly, the Biden White House was not friendly to India at all, despite the vice president having Indian roots. She never really acknowledged those roots. I don't think she came anywhere near India during her campaign, and she tried to run away from that in a way that Usha Vance has not done. So I'd like to say very honestly that it is a very, very important visit, and I'm sure the Prime Minister and J.D. Vance, Vice President Vance, are going to discuss a lot of sensitive issues. And of course, the point is a lot of these issues, a lot of the understanding that are reached may not be publicly revealed, because in statecraft, in diplomacy, especially, for example, where the tech sector is concerned, nobody would like to publicly reveal what we are planning and then have the Chinese come and understand it. So regarding the Indo-Pacific, security of the Indo-Pacific, nobody is going to publicly reveal what the US and Indian strategies are and how they can mesh and meld, because we don't want a country which is not friendly to India, not friendly to the US, to basically get wind of what is happening. So I would say, Vineet, it's a very, very important visit. I would say it's really a defining visit, and Prime Minister Modi knows that, and the welcome he has given to Vice President Vance and Usha Vance. And as I wrote in Sunday Guardian, I mean, we are welcoming, Usha and J.D. Vance to India, not the Vice President, but he's also the Vice President. And if I may say so, this is going to be one of the defining India-U.S. visits. In fact, one of the defining foreign visits where India is concerned. And I would also like to add that, Vance is going to advance U.S. interests. The point is there are so many things that India can do to also advance U.S. interests. I think that's important to understand, because while advancing the U.S. interests, there's so many areas of congruence with India, and Indians to understand that while advancing the Indian interest, there's so many areas of congruence with the United States. Let's not look at the optics. Let's not look at the superficials. The fact is, the tariff blow we got is nothing compared to a tariff blow on a particular neighbor of India. Nothing, actually. So I would say, Vineet, I'm full of hope about this particular visit, and I do believe it's going to be extremely productive from the point of view of very close relationship with Trump 2.0, a very crucial time. He's taken charge of the White House, and he would like to see his successor, somebody who's friendly to him. He wouldn't like to go through the horror of prosecutions and persecutions, frankly, again. So he's going to work hard at that, and Prime Minister Modi has been extending a warm hand to him from the start. So I'm very hopeful that the Vance visit is going to greatly accelerate the progress of the India-U.S. agenda, where both countries can benefit from interaction with each other. As I said, a lot of that is not going to be public, and nor should it be. Thank you, Vinny.
Right, absolutely right. Ambassador Vora, taking a leaf out of what Professor Nalapat said, that it's pretty evident on what the priorities are for the Americans. Look at the tariffs which have been imposed on China, and they continue to be increased every time China retaliates or talks back.
Those guys are stupid. Canada and China are the only two countries that have retaliated. But let me tell you, sir, that the future of the bilateral relationship, I go back to the 1960s, the advertisement for Virginia Slims cigarettes that for the first time women were being introduced and asked to smoke. They were very attractive ads, scantily clad woman, etc. And the punchline, which I believe best describes the bilateral relationship, was, "You've come a long way, baby." I believe that is where we are today with the relationship between India and the United States. It's only going to go forward. There's no looking back, sir.
Mr. Faulkner, how do you look at the treatment that China is getting at this point in time? What should India be doing? Should we be rejoicing?
Well, absolutely. I mean, China wants to dominate the world. They want to dominate it militarily, as we're seeing with the atolls and challenges in the South China Sea and the Philippine territorial waters. They are basically doing their Belt and Road Initiative and their debt traps throughout Latin America. Thankfully, we're starting to push them back. The U.S. is starting to push them back on the Panama Canal, where they've basically been dominating the operations there for several years. So again, China is getting rocked back on its heels by the tariffs and getting rocked back on its heels by the strengthening of India. I want to interject, though, that another thing that we should be watching during the Vance visit is on April 22nd. He's speaking at the International Center. That could be a defining moment for him is in his future, and a defining moment for the U.S. and India's future. You know, when you start to have a major leader from a country have a major address in another country, as you look back through from especially Obama and Egypt and his his basically apology tour back, sort of set the stage for his administration. This could be a major stage set, is that April 22nd International Center address that's coming up.
And Martin, why do you think that this kind of a sentiment was not really palpable when Joe Biden was around? Do you think that once again we dip down to this cycle of Democrats being pro-China and the Republicans being anti-China, or do you think there's more to that?
I think the problem is that Joe Biden had his policies weren't for being polite and political correct towards the whole world. He didn't had like a very defined ideology towards his country, towards how to protect his country or his allies. He wanted to basically be friends with everyone. He wanted to please everyone, and we saw a weak government. That's the reason there were no progress in commercial trade, because he was more focused in his woke agenda or in his inner woke agenda in the US. But now with Trump, I see that he's more focused in protecting what he thinks is important, like his trade partners. And India is by far the most important trade partner in the Southeast of Asia. So that's the reason I think this government is completely interested in moving forward with India and having a strong relationship.
And Professor Nalapad, what about India's permanent stay and permanent membership at the UN? The Americans have always advocated for it. They understand that the world order has changed and the UN is more or less defunct when it comes to its outreach. Is that an area where India definitely can expect America to support?
Look, the fact that the Chinese are going to veto that, the other permanent members, including Russia, will support. France and the UK definitely, both are friends of India. The United States would even sponsor it, but the Chinese are going to find some excuse to veto it by saying some absurd such a thing, like Pakistan should also be a permanent member of the UNSC, which is not acceptable. The second point is that I think we made a slight error of judgment in going along with Japan, Germany, and South Africa, if I'm not wrong, in our UN Security Council quest. We should have gone alone, and like Prime Minister Modi, frankly, believes in India being strong enough to go it alone. So I think we could have gone it alone, but even then there would not have been progress. But in this case, there's no progress at all, because Germany will not be welcome to France and the UK, and frankly to anybody else. They've got too much representation for the Europeans already. And as far as Japan is concerned, it's as toxic as India to China. So the Chinese and now the Russians will never allow that. So I think, frankly, Vineet, I doubt that in the foreseeable future there's going to be India as a permanent member. And quite frankly, you're quite right. Many UN institutions are doing well, such as UNESCO, but the said that, the Security Council is becoming completely deadlocked on every important issue. And frankly, deadlock means complete absence of progress. So I wouldn't hold my breath. At the same time, I don't believe, given the current circumstances, we have lost very much. Thank you.
Ambassador Vora, you and I have spoken in the past as well about India's permanent position in the United Nations, and you've had some, for the lack of a better word, strong reactions to that.
So, United Nations this year, am I correct? 2025 is going to be 80 years old, 80 years young. Do you have any 80-year-old thing in your house that you still use? I'm 74, I'm not 80. You don't, you throw it out. Throw this wretched thing out. And may I suggest something also, Professor Nalapat, if you agree, and Scott sir, if you agree, that's a very expensive piece of real estate that they have in Manhattan. Kick out all the diplomats, convert it into a nightclub. It'll do more for global harmony than what it is doing now.
You're absolutely right. Mr. Faulkner, your thoughts on the United Nations and, why it does not represent, 1.5 billion worth of humanity in its policies and its procedures?
The United Nations has long overstayed its welcome in the U.S. and well overstayed its welcome in the world. I mean, it is when you have some of the most totalitarian states now chairing human rights commissions and things. I mean, I wrote articles all of last year that the UN should be actually moved to someplace like Johannesburg, so that all the people who are currently living off the fat of the land in the New York City area can go and see what they've wrought in a place like Johannesburg. I think that the UN, there's very little support, certainly on the Republican side, certainly within the Trump world, for the UN to even exist, certainly for the U.S. to continue funding it, and for people like myself, for the U.S. even to host it. It's long overdue for an overhaul, long overdue for abolition, and just like the ambassador just said, you have an entity that was created at the end of World War II. Nationalist China was the permanent national Security Council person, not Communist China. So the whole concept of who's on that board in the Security Council is totally absurd. I mean, it should be like the top 5 or 6 economies in the world, at which point India is clearly one of those. So it is so absurd that we are still having to put up with the United Nations on so many of these fronts, and certainly to even keep hosting it in New York.
All right, you're absolutely right, sir. And that is something that definitely is on the horizon and on the agenda for India as well as the United States as they work out and work through these challenging times by means of cooperation, friendship, bilateral cooperation, and these important meetings as well. Would like to thank everyone who joined us on this conversation. We have some breaking news to talk about now. A big breakthrough in the Murshidabad violence probe. The Bengal STF has arrested 2 people. Ziaul Sheikh, one of the accused in the murder of a father and son in Murshidabad's Jafrabad. 13 more people have been arrested from Jharsuguda, Odisha. And according to sources, they had gone to this place after the violence in Murshidabad. Rainik Datta, my colleague who's been keeping a close eye on these developments, is joining us on the broadcast. रैनिक जानकारी मिल रही है कि एक ब्रेक थ्रू हुआ है, 2 लोगों की गिरफ्तारी हुई है।
हाँ, एकदम देखिए, मुर्शिदाबाद कांड में अभी एसटीएफ के हाथ में एक ब्रेक थ्रू लगा है, क्योंकि मुर्शिदाबाद में जो घटना घटा था उसके बाद जिस तरीके का पुलिस का मूवमेंट था, उसमें पुलिस की तरफ से 2 एसआईटी तैयार किया गया था 2 अलग मामले पर। पहला तो था जाफराबाद में जो पिता पुत्र का पीट कर हत्या किया गया था, उस मामले पर एक एसआईटी तैयार किया गया था, और मुर्शिदाबाद में जो वायलेंस का घटना घटा था उसका एक एसआईटी गठन किया गया था। और ये 2 मामले पर पुलिस के हाथ में एक इंफॉर्मेशन लगा था कि इसके साथ जो लोग शामिल थे वो लोग पश्चिम बंगाल छोड़कर उड़ीसा भाग गए हैं। और इसके बाद ही एसटीएफ का एक टीम उड़ीसा में पहुंचे थे। उड़ीसा में पहुंचने के बाद टोटल 13 लोगों को गिरफ्तार किया गया है, जैसे कि एसटीएफ का सूत्रों के हवाले से जो खबर मिल रहा है। पुलिस के सूत्रों के हवाले से जो खबर मिल रहा है कि ये जो दो मामला है, यानी जो पिता पुत्र का हत्या किया गया था, वो मामले पर 2 मेन एक्यूज को गिरफ्तार किया गया है। दूसरा, और भी 11 जो लोग हैं वो लोग भी वायलेंस के साथ शामिल थे। मुर्शिदाबाद में जो वायलेंस का घटना घटा था, जो लोग पुलिस के ऊपर हमला किए थे, उस मामले पर टोटल 11 लोगों को गिरफ्तार किया गया है। यानी टोटल कुल मिलाकर अभी 13 लोगों को गिरफ्तार किया गया है। जैसे कि पुलिस की तरफ से कहा जा रहा है कि अभी तक टोटल जो मुर्शिदाबाद में वायलेंस हुआ था, उस वायलेंस का घटना में टोटल 290 के ऊपर लोगों को गिरफ्तार किया गया है। और उसके साथ साथ ही
चलिए रानिक, इस जानकारी के लिए हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। We take a short break on that note. We'll be right back with more news and updates.
Co-powered by PolicyBazaar.com. हर फैमिली होगी इंश्योर्ड।
सस्ते वाले दाल मसाले स्वाद हुआ बेकार, MDH की हल्दी मिर्ची धनिया करे कमाल। ये रंग दे, ये खुशबू दे, ये तीखा, ये कम पड़े, क्या निराला MDH मसाला।
अगर आप बनना चाहते हैं एंकर या फिर आप में है जुनून एक तेज तर्रार न्यूज रिपोर्टर बनने का,
जीरा से प्यास बुझाएं,
डाइजेशन के लिए मस्त, शरीर में नमक पानी का बैलेंस बनाए।
सिप सिप जीरा सिप MDH का जुनून, जीरा सिप जीरा सिप।
अगर आप बनना चाहते हैं एंकर या फिर आप में है जुनून एक तेज तर्रार न्यूज रिपोर्टर बनने का, तो आप ज्वाइन करें ITV और इंडिया न्यूज।
लाल रंग इसका अपार, तीखा कम है फिर भी स्वाद, बेमिसाल बेमिसाल MDH कश्मीरी,
MDH कश्मीरी,
MDH।
अगर आप बनना चाहते हैं एंकर या फिर आप में है जुनून एक तेज तर्रार न्यूज रिपोर्टर बनने का, तो आप ज्वाइन करें ITV और इंडिया Newsx का मीडिया स्कूल। ITV नेक्स्ट मीडिया इंटरनेशनल स्कूल का कोर्स।
MDH का किचन किंग किचन में हो तो हम सब कुछ बना सकते हैं। बैंगन का भरता, आलू गोभी, भिंडी मसाला और भी बहुत कुछ।
MDH।
अगर आप बनना चाहते हैं एंकर या फिर आप में है जुनून एक तेज तर्रार न्यूज रिपोर्टर बनने का, तो आप ज्वाइन करें ITV और इंडिया न्यूज।
सस्ते वाले दाल मसाले स्वाद हुआ बेकार, MDH की हल्दी मिर्ची धनिया करे कमाल। ये रंग दे, ये खुशबू दे, ये तीखा, ये कम पड़े, क्या निराला MDH मसाला।
Newsx World reports to you from ground zero. The disaster hit Bangkok. Another mortal remain of a person was found just a while back.
Seeing these